are this Friday.
I have to change my hearing aid. I can't hear.
This Friday is a very non-traditional. What
Is there music? Oh my God.
and then we go around and we ask them, they don't have it, what do you think about it? Let's go everyone talk, let's go like we'll give you the Thanksgiving.
Very depressed because Lester was in the
So you'll find, you don't have to answer. We do that. And then not this Friday, but next Friday, we have the piano, it's a very big music. So, oh, look at that. Is there anything up here?
can't understand it, then
it would not,
no, carry it with me, period. I'm joking. You understand this?
Wait a minute, doesn't have a picture of you on it, that's why I know who you are.
yeah, they might not believe it's really you.
It's almost come down to that.
It's very, yeah.
Did you ever meet a Karaite?
Harite, no. Nope, I have not met a Karaite.
The Samaritans were among us. My muscles were not cooperating with walking.
That's hard.
I did too much walking, and I don't know why, but whatever it is, everything is just so tight. I walked here without using a cane, which is good.
Yes?
But last week it hurt.
I understand.
I had my trainer use a gun on me, and my stretch therapist did some more stretching, and I'm feeling better.
Good.
Right? Good morning.
Good morning, everyone. Nope. Yeah, I have the air blowing on me. I don't want to. Well, it shouldn't be on in the first place. Yeah. Okay, everyone, let's get started. So we started last week the subject of mitzvot, and I want to finish up the subject of mitzvot today. And just super duper quick review. You'll recall that last week we said a mitzvah, in common parlance, has become the meaning for a good deed. And that's not what it means. It's a command from God, a commandment from God. God tells us to do these things. And so when we say, well, it was a mitzvah that you visited so-and-so in the hospital, it was. It was a mitzvah, and you did do something nice. And that is to absolutely be commended. Absolutely. But we also have to understand, it isn't that, well, how do I say this nicely? It isn't that I went above and beyond what I needed to do, and I was such a good person, and I went over and I visited so-and-so in the hospital, and that, makes me a good person. It isn't that. God told us to do that. God said, visit the sick. It isn't, yes, it's really good when we do it. Yes, and it's a good thing when we do it, but it's a commandment from God. All right. It absolutely counts. So the question was, so it doesn't count? It absolutely counts. In fact, visiting the sick and comforting the bereaved is at the very top of the list of things that God asks us to do. So, it counts a whole lot. It does. All right. So we left off last week with the Samaritans and the Karaites and the Chukim and the Mishpatim. So I want to just very quickly remember we spoke last week about Chukim and Mishpatim. These are two kinds of laws that we have from God. And what we said are Chukim are laws that we don't really understand. The ritual laws we don't understand. Mishpatim are laws that we definitely understand. Don't steal, don't commit adultery, don't murder. Those are mishpatim, as well as a whole bunch of other ethical rules in our tradition about how to treat people, what to do in business, these kinds of things. And so we understand those. The chukim, we don't understand. Don't eat pork. Don't know why. God said so. And in traditional Judaism, basically that is the mindset. It's like, God said not to do it, therefore we aren't going to do it. We don't need to question, we don't need to analyze, God said not to, therefore we don't. Done. So remember I told you that the whole reform of the reform movement, and it's not reformed, it's reform. The whole reform of the reform movement was to make the ritual law voluntary. So, for instance, men and women not sitting together or praying together in synagogue. That's a piece of ritual law. That's a chok. And so the reform movement said, you don't have to. We don't have to do that if you don't want to. And of course, men wanted to sit with their wives, and wives wanted to sit with their husbands, and so that was done away with. Yes, Judy. That didn't come from God, though. No, it did not. It came from the rabbis. And how did that come about? Because the rabbis understood the passage. When we cross the Red Sea, Moses takes the people to sing, basically, and celebrate. But not celebrate the destruction of the Egyptians, celebrate that they sing to God, basically, thanking God. And Miriam takes the women. So the rabbis infer, well, if Miriam takes the women, then Moses took the men. That only stands to reason. And if Moses took the men over there to pray and sing, and Miriam took the women over there to pray and sing, it stands to reason when you pray and when you sing, you got to be separate. And so that's how the Mechitza came about. And look, I don't want to make light of it. It's an Orthodox law. And for Orthodoxy, it's a very beautiful thing. And I have complete respect for Orthodoxy. It's not our way, clearly, but it's their way. And for them, it's important. And so, good for them. It's good for them.
So we were in Montreal.
We went to a traditional conservative synagogue. And men and women were separated there too. How long ago? 15 years ago? So as I've told you a number of times, the problem with the conservative movement, and it is a problem, the challenge, the whatever we want to call it for the conservative movement, is that it's gray. It's in the middle. If you are an Orthodox Jew, then you know what your obligations are. It's very clear. It's black and white. It's very clear what your obligations are. If you are a Reformed Jew, you understand. This is what I have to do. These other ones I don't have to do if I don't want to. And if you're a conservative Jew, then you're in the middle somewhere. And in the middle somewhere is you have to do these things, but because we have been able to update things, you don't have to do these things, but if you want to, you can do this, but you do have to do. It's gray, and it's difficult to navigate. It's one of the reasons why I think in modern times people are moving to the two outside positions, because it's very clear. You know what is expected of you or what you don't have to do. Conservative Judaism is a difficult road to follow, and it looks different on the East Coast and the West Coast. You know, part of the challenge within conservative Judaism is that the rabbi, do you know what the rabbi is called? Say again? Mare Da'atra, which means the master of the place, which means the rabbi can determine which of the halachot are we going to follow at this restaurant, at this synagogue, right? The rabbi can't say, you know what, we're not going to follow kashrut. We're going to have pork chops for dinner here. No, he can't do that. He cannot do that. Why? Because the conservative movement has, the platform of the conservative movement is that it's a halachic movement. You must respect halakha. However, the halachot has evolved within conservative Judaism. So, for Orthodox Jews, you're not going to drive to the synagogue. You have to walk. That's part of what it means to be an Orthodox Jew. You have to live close enough to a synagogue to be able to walk there. If you're a Reformed Jew, it doesn't matter, because that's a part of ritual law, and you say, look, I'm in Denver, and it's January. I'm not walking to the synagogue. No, thank you. And if you're a conservative Jew, what's the middle ground? The middle ground is the conservative movement said, well, you could drive to and from synagogue because, maybe there's 4 feet of snow outside. You're living in Milwaukee, and look, it's hard. So you can drive to and from synagogue. Well, then maybe it's like, well, I'll drive to synagogue, and on the way home, I'll just pick up a gallon of milk that I need for Shabbat or for whatever. Okay, so it's like, yeah, it's gray. And people, is like, whenever it's gray, you want to wiggle around in the gray and figure out, what can I get away with, what can I not get away with? So the conservative situation it's a movement that is slowly, I think, giving way to the two, to the right and the left.
I don't think that your example just now was an example of gray.
So Joette says, I don't think your example now was an example of gray. Good!
Because purchasing anything on Shabbat is not allowed.
Because purchasing anything on Shabbat is not allowed.
What I would say is an example of gray.
What I would say is an example of gray is
Going to my friend's house for Shabbat dinner.
going to my friend's house for Shabbat dinner by car.
Yeah, because the takana is that you're allowed to drive to shul on Shabbat.
Because the law, so Joette the ruling. In other words, you may not drive on Shabbat. The conservative movement said, well, that's not really, that doesn't really hold up for us in the modern era. You can't walk to Shabbat. It's dangerous. You could die if you're in the middle of a big snowstorm in some. And so, what's the greater mitzvah? You get to Shabbat service, or you break a rule and you drive to synagogue. So go ahead, Joette.
So
Because the takana is
that you can drive to synagogue.
correct.
But not any other drive.
That you can drive to synagogue, but not any other driving.
So, for myself, my gray area is, I give myself permission to drive to a friend for Shabbat dinner.
Good. So Joette says, for myself, I give myself permission to drive to a friend's house for Shabbat dinner. And so my answer to that will be, that's not okay also, because it's not to and from synagogue. So what it means is, the gray area becomes sort of up to each person a little bit. And I agree with you in the sense that, so Joette says, I will drive to a friend's house on Shabbat for Shabbat dinner. And so the question that always comes to me is, what's the greater mitzvah? Would God want you to stay home by yourself and eat by yourself? Or would God want you to celebrate Shabbat with your friends at your friend's home, reciting certain prayers, singing, whatever you do at Shabbat dinner? And I think the greater mitzvah certainly is, God would prefer that you're with your friends celebrating Shabbat, because that's what God wants you to do. He wants you to celebrate Shabbat. But halakhically, it's not okay. So the way that I do it in my synagogue, and those of you who are traditional will not like it, but I do it because I think it's the right thing to do, is, so for instance, Purim this year fell on a Friday night, which made it easy. We didn't have to change anything. But in the past, Purim generally doesn't fall on a night when...
It was Thursday night.
We celebrated Friday night.
I know, but Purim was actually Thursday night.
But the first day was...
Well, there's only one, was Friday.
Right. So what I have done in the past is, Purim falls on a Wednesday, let's say, and we're going to do our big Purim spiel. I play Haman every year, and I run around and scream at people, and they throw things at me, and they stick their tongue out at me, all kinds of things like that. And so for me, it's like, how many people am I having on a Wednesday night? It makes no sense. I'll have 4 people on a Wednesday night to celebrate Purim. So I moved the Purim celebration to Sunday, when I know I'll get 30 people. Is it halakhic? No, absolutely not. But what's the greater mitzvah? Does God want me to celebrate this holiday with all of my congregants in a joyous, wonderful way that God has asked us to celebrate Purim? Or, if I follow the halakha and I'm absolutely halakhically correct and I have 4 people in front of me and we read the Megillah, which is the greater mitzvah? So I deferred to that side. Yes, Lana, first.
Sorry.
I'm personally traditional on Shabbat. I have not driven in like 40 years or something. But I'll have people come to my house for a Shabbat dinner because they don't celebrate anything. It is the greater mitzvah. It's better for them to come and drive to my house and have a Shabbat dinner. Same thing in Chabad. Chabad's practice is, the halacha is you don't drive to synagogue on Shabbos. However, the people that they have would be doing other things, and they just simply don't ask you how you got there.
Of course.
And you're better there. It's a greater good.
Yes. Evie.
I'd like to apologize to anyone if speak out of turn. I'm not hearing, and I can't always tell when someone stops speaking. My question is, my father lit tefillin every morning, and he had his talit in a bag. We were kosher. He, of course, rode to synagogue because there wasn't any. Confuses me, and I never wanted to ask Rabbi Shmuley about it because nobody carries anything to Chabad. They store their holy garments in the thing. And so what's the difference between the Orthodox and really, I guess Chabad is ultra-Orthodox?
No. Chabad is simply Hasidic. They are, so you have Orthodox, which encompasses these days modern Orthodoxy. Oh, the question is, what's the difference between Orthodox and Hasidic? So Chabad is Hasidic. And modern, in Orthodoxy, we have Orthodox and modern Orthodox. And then we have the Hasidic movements, of which Chabad is one. There are several others. And the Hasidic movements are mystical movements that focus on a different area of Judaism. As I talked to you last week, if you're a modern Orthodox, your focus is on study and prayer. Good. If you are Hasidic, your focus is on ecstatic prayer and study. There's a slight difference in the two, and the Hasidim are a mystical movement. The modern Orthodoxy came out of Talmud study. Hasidism came out of the necessity that the Baal Shem Tov saw for the uneducated farmers who were working in their fields all day to have an experience with God. Why is it that only the Talmud scholars in town should be able to access God through study? What about these poor farmers? Don't they have a way to access God? The Baal Shem Tov said, yes, absolutely they do. They may not be able to read and interpret Talmud, but they can be out in the fields and they can sing to God with joy, and God will hear them. That's their way to get to God. It's beautiful. Hasidism is very beautiful. It's very beautiful. It's not our way, but it's very beautiful. Okay, Lana, one more, and then we got to move on.
One real quick thing, a clarification on carrying on Shabbos. Chabad does not, most people in Chabad do not observe an Eruv. What?
Most?
I'll do my best. I hope you can hear this. Most people in Chabad do not observe the Eruv. An Eruv is an area in the city that is like, it's fenced in. And most Orthodox people do. But there's people in Chabad that do observe it and do carry on Shabbos, and they observe the Eruv. They're the exceptions to the rule.
I understand it's very expensive to create
An Eruv.
area.
An Eruv. Okay, so I wanna keep going on mitzvot because I have to finish up mitzvot today, and we have a lot of stuff to talk about. Okay, so that's chukim and mishpatim, ritual law, ethical law, ritual law, voluntary for Reform Jews, mandatory, obligatory for conservative and Orthodox Jews. All right. Then we talked a little bit about the Samaritans and the Karaites. The Karaites and the Samaritans are two groups who do not, presently and also in the past, accept the rabbinic law, accept the oral interpretations. So, we have rules, laws. You'll see this first under mitzvot. It says d'oraita versus d'Rabbanan. Rules that are in our written texts, don't eat pork, God says, versus laws from the rabbis, don't mix meat and milk. And And the Samaritans and the Karaites do not follow what the rabbis say. They are the only two groups who do not. So, for instance, if you are a Karaite, you will eat meat and milk together. You can have a cheeseburger if you're a Karaite. And you say, how can that possibly be? And it's because, well, what is written? God says, do not boil a kid in its mother's milk. Don't cook meat and milk together. Says nothing about eating meat and milk together. It only says don't cook them together. It's the rabbis who say, well, that verse actually means don't cook it together, don't eat it together, and don't sell it to a Jew together. Don't sell a cheeseburger to a Jew. And that's from the rabbis. The Karaites and the Samaritans don't follow rabbinic law. It's like what's written in our Torah, and the Samaritans have their Samaritan Torah, which is essentially our Torah. Mount Sinai has been replaced by Mount Gerizim. And so the Samaritans still do a Passover sacrifice once a year atop their mountain. Yes, they do. The Karaites do not. Why don't the Karaites sacrifice anymore? And the reason is because the Karaites believe that everyone, all the Karaites, at some point have been made impure by being around or touching a corpse. And that disqualifies any of them from bringing a sacrifice. And the idea is that the only way that they could do that again is to get the ashes of the red heifer, which we read last week in synagogue, and create a ritual for purification, so that if you are a Karaite and a Levi, you can bring sacrifices again. But that can't be done, so hence the Karaites do not sacrifice. So what about the Ethiopians and the Lemda? Okay. So the Ethiopians, what's the word? I want to say sued, but it's not really the right word. The Ethiopians petitioned for status as Jews to the state of Israel, and the state of Israel determined that there was enough information there with this group of Ethiopians to include them as Jews and bring them to Israel. And so we had the several incredible operations where they were flown out of Ethiopia. That's the good news. The bad news is, to my knowledge, they have not been accepted at all into Israeli society, and they live on the margins, they live in poverty, and it's not a good situation for them in Israel at all. No. The Ethiopians will follow. They are not Karaites or Samaritans, so they will follow exactly rabbinic halakha and the laws of Israel. The only change to that I know of is that many of them had more than one wife. And what the state of Israel said is, okay, you can bring your 3 wives with you when you come to Israel, but you may not have a 4th wife. You can have, the Bible says you can have multiple wives. It does. I mean, the Torah law says you can have multiple wives. Rabbinic law changed that in medieval times. However, since they already had the 3 wives, Israel said, okay, bring your 3 wives, but you may not have any more. That's it. And anyone who came over can only have 1. Okay, wait. Let's keep going. I hadn't heard anything about that. how interesting.
Because they weren't under rabbinic law.
They weren't under rabbinic law, so I don't know, maybe there was an allowance for that community. I'll have to find out.
What they were doing in Ethiopia is that when
What they were doing in Ethiopia,
they didn't mix,
they didn't mix.
it's part in Ethiopia. When they went to Israel, they may have changed their habits.
When they came to Israel, they may have changed their habits. There's nothing in the Torah about chicken, not mentioned anywhere. And so
It was considered part.
so your question will be, well, then how did it get considered meat? How did it go in the meat category and say that it's not okay?
Where do the Karaites live today?
Where do the Karaites live today? All over the country, all over the world. There are many Karaite communities. All over. Lana.
It became a fence around the Torah because if you're looking at raw turkey and veal, they look the same, they even taste the same. So in case you're making a mistake, you don't want to mix the veal into dairy products. So then it became a fence around the Torah.
So the idea is that raw veal and raw chicken look very much alike. And lest somebody use veal with a milk dish thinking that is chicken, the rabbi said, we're going to make chicken in the category of meat so that nobody could ever make a mistake. And then your question to me will be, look, we're in 2025. We have really good ways to tell if something is veal or it's chicken. So it doesn't make sense to keep chicken as meat. And my answer to you will be exactly what Lana said. The rabbi said, look, we're not changing it now. We're not changing it. No. The rabbis changed kitniot and made it okay for conservative Jews for Passover, but they're not changing chicken. It's not going to happen. Joette.
Yeah, but the reason they changed kitniot is because there were Jews who were eating kitniot, and it is permissible.
Correct.
So if it's permissible for these Jews, then it's
Correct.
permissible for those.
Correct. We're going to get, and save that thought, because I'm going to get to it in about 20 minutes if I can get to it. Yes. Yes, last question. Eileen.
Talking about now or in the past about the Ethiopians coming and they're living out
Now.
now? Okay, so they can come with their 3 wives and they're already married. Do they have a law? The law is different than the book they're reading, whatever.
Do they have a law that what?
Like we can have 3 wives.
Right, but what the state of Israel said, we'll make an accommodation to those of you who already have multiple wives.
Yeah, but
Once,
that was
that was a long time ago. Yes, that was a long time ago. Oh, that's what you're asking. No, that was a long time ago when they first came over. No. Anybody who is born now into Israel and to that community can only have one wife. Yes. Okay, let me keep going. Okay, so Karaites and Samaritans do not follow the rabbinic law. They only follow what is in our text, in the Torah. All right. So we just talked about mitzvot deoraita versus derabanan. Rules that God gave us and rules that the rabbis gave us. And so your question will be, what? Why do the rabbis get to make the laws? Why do they get to make the rules? Who gave them the power? Who made them so important? And the answer is they made themselves important. Quite frankly, they made themselves important. At the end of, in the first century, there had been several groups of Jews. You had the Zealots, you had the Sadducees, you had the Pharisees, you had Zealots, Sadducees, Pharisees, and Essenes. Thank you very much. And I'll include in there the Nazarenes too, even though Josephus doesn't include them, those Jews who are following Jesus. And By 70 CE, all of those groups except the Pharisees had been gone defunct for one reason or another. The Sadducees didn't have a temple anymore after it was destroyed. The Essenes died out in the desert in the 1st century. The Zealots were conquered during the Roman wars. And so the only group left was the Pharisees. Out of the Pharisaic tradition come the rabbis. The Pharisees do not become the rabbis. No. But the rabbis inherit a legal tradition from the Pharisees. And then the rabbis come into the position of being the people who are running Judaism from now on. They're the ones who are making the decisions. Everybody else is out of the picture, basically. And in a very, 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 very famous passage in the Talmud called Tanor Shel Achnai, the rabbis give themselves the authority to interpret God's word. Yes, Rosa.
I have a question about the Jews in Babylon.
What about the Jews in Babylon?
What did they practice?
What did they practice? So what did the Jews in Babylonia practice? Because remember, the Jews who were in captivity, in exile, some came back, a whole bunch stayed in Babylonia. So what did they practice? They practiced rabbinic Judaism, of course, they did, after the rabbis took over, because that's how we got the Talmud, right? So we had Talmudic academies. If you're talking about what did they do between 538 and 70 CE, that's a really interesting question. Because there were no rabbis yet. The second temple had been reconstructed in Jerusalem by the returning exiles. It wasn't a very big temple or a very anything, but it was a temple and there were sacrifices there. And the Sadducees, probably the Sadducees, were in charge of the sacrifices, and they were up and running again. The priests were making sacrifices. Okay. So what did the Babylonian community do? Probably they were meeting. They were engaging in prayer sessions, something kind of, sort of, maybe a little bit like what we think of today, because that's all they could do. They couldn't sacrifice anywhere, right? The only place that could sacrifice was the temple in Jerusalem. They were in Babylon. Joette.
Wouldn't that have been similar to, excuse me, Jews who lived too far from Jerusalem to get there for sex, like in northern Israel?
Wouldn't that have been the same as for Jews who lived too far away from Jerusalem in order to bring sacrifices? Well, that's part of the reason why we have Pesach Sheni, why we have holidays that allow you to celebrate the holiday after the halachic day to celebrate the holiday, because people had to come from long distances and they might not have been able to make it there in time. And also the rabbi, it wasn't the rabbis, but by this time, but it was also decided that, look, if you do it at least once in your lifetime rather than every single time, similar kind of, sort of, maybe kind of, sort of, to the modern day Hajj, in which Muslims go to Mecca. And the idea is, look, if you do it once in your lifetime, you have accomplished the mitzvah in their tradition of making the pilgrimage festival. Okay, I got to keep going. All right, then we have mitzvot aseh versus lo ta'aseh, men versus women. Okay, aseh means that laws that you have to do, and laws that you from which you are forbidden, and these apply to both men and women after the age of majority. 12 for a woman, 13 for a man. And so this is why, for instance, I get very upset with our current status of bar and bat mitzvah. bar mitzvah means daughter, son of the commandment. What it really means is that at that age, at that day, in that ceremony, that child agrees to be bound by halakha. Now, you absolutely will see this with Chabad and in Orthodoxy. Absolutely. The children understand, from this day forward, I have to observe halakha the way my parents are. For other than Orthodoxy, unfortunately, it's just become a big, and it upsets me greatly. It upsets me greatly. Yeah, it's a graduation ceremony. It just doesn't have meaning. So at all our bar and bat mitzvah, we don't have many anymore, but when we did, I would always speak about the significance of this day. And so at the age of majority, both are required to observe negative commandments. Both men and women are required to observe, you shall not do this. Men are required for all positive commandments. Women are required for all positive commandments and time-bound mitzvot. Are exempt from time-bound mitzvot. Men are required for all positive commandments. Women are exempt from time-bound mitzvot. So what's a time-bound mitzvot? Men are required in Judaism, under halakha, to pray 3 times a day. Women are exempt from praying 3 times a day because, well, there are a number of reasons, but I think the easiest explanation is, the idea that women are basically the caregivers for the children, and that Jewish child's needs are more important than that woman being in a minyan to pray. But even if she could be counted in a minyan, and we're going to talk about that in a second, to pray. And so the child's needs are more important. So the women were exempt from prayer. They didn't have to pray 3 times a day. That's the man's job. The women make sure the children are fed and they're clothed and they're well taken care of because that Jewish child is super precious to us.
I thought that if there was no man in the house, that the woman was supposed to pray 3 times a day.
If there was no man in the
The
house,
husband had died or left the home for some reason, and there was children in the house, that a woman was required to pray. No?
not that I know of. No. Now, here's a great example of the conservative movement. Orthodoxy said, no, women don't pray. Reform said, well, yeah, women pray. Women wear talit. Women can do anything. They can put on tefillin. They can do anything. We are abrogating that religious part of the law. Women can do everything. Conservative movement said, well, we'd like to allow women to pray, but we can't just say, okay, women can pray. We have to find a halachic way out of it. And the idea was that the first women who made this request were no longer of childbearing age. And so they went to the committee and said, look, I'm 55 years old, 60 years old. I'm not having any more children. I can't have any more children. Why can't I bind myself to the same obligations as a man and pray with the men? And the conservative movement said, good question. And that's how the idea first moved into conservative Judaism. That in the beginning, as long as women said, I will take on the same obligations as a man, then they could pray with the women. Women being called for an aliyah. In Orthodoxy, no. Reform, we can do it. Women should be equal. We can do it. Conservative movement said, okay, well, what's the reason that the women can't be called to the Torah? And there are a number of different reasons. If you really want to know the reason why in Orthodoxy a woman can't be called to the Torah, it has nothing to do with purity. It doesn't. No, the real reason is because in Orthodoxy, it's considered a shanda. It's considered an embarrassment for the congregation. The men should be praying. If we don't have enough men in this congregation who are praying, and we have to call a woman, what an embarrassment to this congregation that we don't have enough men. Because it's obligatory for the men to be there to pray. And if there aren't enough men there, that is an embarrassment to the congregation. I'm just telling you what is. An embarrassment that we couldn't get 10 men to be there.
Don't show up. It's
Yes.
an embarrassment to the congregation.
Sure. Okay. Bein Adam lechavero versus Bein Adam lemakom. We have, what time do I have? Okay. We have mitzvot that are between ourselves and God, and mitzvot that are between us and each other. So, an example of a transgression against God in terms of the halakha. Eating treif, beautiful. If I go out and order a cheeseburger, if I'm a traditional Jew, and I go out and order a cheeseburger, whom am I hurting? I'm not hurting any of you. I'm hurting my relationship with God because I promised God that I wasn't going to do that. That is a law between humans and God. A law between us, if Gary comes to me for some kind of transaction and I charge him money and I overcharge him and cheat him, that is a transgression that I have laid on another human being. Yom Kippur, if you come sincerely to Yom Kippur, it takes care of this one between you and God. I'm sorry, God, that I was weak and I had a cheeseburger. That's when, and if you mean it, that's when, and God knows what's in your heart. That's the important thing. God says, okay, look, I know you're not going to be perfect. Let's give it another shot. But if I want forgiveness for what I did to Gary, I have to go to Gary first and say, Gary, you know what? I did something really horrible, and I have to own up to it, and I'm terribly sorry, and it will never happen again. Then God says, okay, good. Now I will forgive you. So we have these different types of things. Part of my rabbinate is the idea that I never get into these kinds of things. In other words, I don't care if you eat a cheeseburger. It's none of my business. I don't care if you go shopping on Shabbat. It's none of my business. It's between you and God. What is my business is when you walk out the front door, are you presenting the best version of yourself possible to the world? Are you being kind? Are you being compassionate? Are you being fair? Are you being honest? That's what I care about. The other stuff is between you and God, and on the day when you are no longer here, you and God will discuss it in another place. Okay? That's not my business. I'll tell you what our tradition says if you ask me, but I'm not going to hold you responsible for it. That's not my job, I don't think. All right. Minhag versus halakha. Minhag is a custom. Halakha is a law. So, for instance, let's say in your congregation, everyone rises when you say the Shema. And in my congregation, everyone sits when we say the Shema.
Could you repeat that, please?
Sure. So, minhag is a custom, halakha is a law. So let's say in your congregation, everybody rises for the Shema. In my congregation, we all sit for the Shema. Neither one is wrong. It's just how you do it in your congregation. And you've done it that way for however long you've done it. In my congregation, this is how we do it. So in your congregation, that mincha, that custom, has become like halakha. For your congregation, the law is everyone stands for the Shema. So mincha can take the importance and the power of halakha. Okay. So the Pharisees come to power, ascend to prominence, I should say, around the year 165 BCE. That's the same time as the Maccabees, by the way. And the Pharisees ascend to power, and from that time on, they are creating law. And their laws are very simple. The law is this, it's this, it's this, it's this. And they create law for different categories. They create laws for laws for agriculture, for holidays. They create laws for women, for holiness, for purity. And all these laws are transmitted orally. There is somebody who memorizes all these laws and goes around to different communities and says, this is the law, this is the law, this is the law, this is the law, this is the law. In 200 CE, those laws get written down and codified by Rabbi Judah Hanasi. And those laws become known as the Mishnah. And then, after that, the rabbis start discussing them. So, for instance, the law says you will not lie, following a verse from Exodus. And the rabbis then say, well, we got to talk about that. You don't lie ever, for any reason, under any circumstance, ever? Really? Okay, well, when could lying be okay? And so the rabbis have a very long discussion about this, and they come out with, well, there are some times when it's okay to tell a little white lie. That's okay. And so the Mishnah plus the Gemara, the discussions from the rabbis, equals what we call the Talmud. And so what we end up having, okay, 10:50, I'm going to finish up with this. Okay, so then all of these laws that we have, the Talmud, if you put it on your bookshelf, the Talmud is a very long set of books. And they are discussions. At the end of each discussion, the law says the law is according to such and such a rabbi, or they say teku. We don't know. We'll figure it out when Elijah comes. They don't know. And so there was a movement that said, look, you know what, I can't read all these discussions from the rabbis. Just tell me what the law is. Just tell me the law. What are the laws of Sukkot? What do I have to do with the etrog? What do I have to do with the lulav? And so there was an attempt, first by Maimonides, to codify the halakha. And he wrote a book called the Mishnah Torah, and it was the first attempt to put all the laws in book form so that you could just look at the law. And it was, unfortunately, still very long. And the people said, no. And the other rabbis were very annoyed at Maimonides because Maimonides just said, this is the law. And the rabbi said, oh, yeah? Oh, really? How do you get that? Where did you derive that that's the law? Who do you think you are? So Mishnah Torah was not accepted. Then came a second attempt called by Joseph ben Asher, called the Arba Turim. And again, it was too long. And then came the final attempt called the Shulchan Aruch, the set table is what it means in Hebrew, the Shulchan Aruch. Sorry, I'm going over a little bit, but I'm just finishing right now. And that was written by Joseph Caro in 1563. And it is the shortest of the three, and it is the one that caught on. It is in use at this very moment among Orthodoxy. If you want to find out what the law is, you consult the Shulchan Aruch. The problem with the Shulchan Aruch is that it's written by a Sephardic rabbi. All of these law codes were written by Sephardic rabbi, and they laid down the law for the Sephardim, which in many cases was the same as the Ashkenazim, but in some cases not. And this goes exactly to Joette's point earlier about Kitniot, right? So, in Israel, what do you eat on Passover? Rice, for sure. And legumes? Yeah, because that's what you have in Israel. In Lithuania, you don't have rice and string beans. You have cabbage and potatoes. And so part of the problem with the law codes as they were written for basically Sephardic Jews. So in medieval times, along came Rabbi Moses Isserlis, who looked at the Shulchan Aruch and said, okay, good. However, and he wrote down commentary. And he said, whereas Sephardic Jews do this, we Ashkenazic Jews do this. And so then the Shulchan Aruch became a law book for both Sephardic Jews and Ashkenazic Jews, which made it much more usable, because then Ashkenazic Jews could look at it and find out the law for them, as opposed to what the Sephardic Jews were doing. Okay, everyone. Yes, now we're done with mitzvot. Next week we're going to work on being a chosen people. And what does that mean? And how did that happen? So thank you all for your comments today. Everything really good. Have a wonderful, wonderful week, everyone.
Rabbi, does your synagogue have amplification
It's pretty loud.
louder than this?
Yeah.
It's pretty loud, unfortunately. Clarification, not criticism. In Orthodoxy, women are allowed to do all the prayers and put on the fill-in, though it wasn't encouraged a long time ago. But and women have minions, and they can read Torah.
They do now.
Yeah, now that's
But
now.
that's pretty
Modern.
Pretty modern.
And it is under really modern Orthodoxy.
Yeah.
But the prayer, personal prayer, and doing what the men do in the morning without a minion
Right.
is encouraged.
Yeah. So my only
The difference is,
Yes.
is it sure?
the only point I was trying to convey is that for
Yeah.
the men, it's obligatory.
Right.
For the women, if they want to pray, go
Right,
for it.
right. Women's lib listen to this and they say, oh, this is how horrible. But if the law had been that the women had to get up at 5:30 in the morning and go to a minyan, they'd be singing a different tune.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Rabbi,
Yes. Yes.
I want to say this. I just want to respond to you. I don't know any other synagogue, except I go to Atlanta, Georgia.
Okay, copy.
The synagogue, which I've been here since 1978, no longer officiates. Rabbi Bernhardt changed it to now a liberal synagogue. And I know a lot of people, and I don't know the majority, but I know a lot of people. I would say probably 85% of people who secularist, kosher,
I think I recognize very really a congregation of Reformed Jews, except for a few, a congregation of Reformed Jews who either started going there because their parents went there,
Guess what?
or because they started in the 1950s at that synagogue when that was the fashion. the whole thing, well, then that's what we have to focus on. The halachot were designed to make you a good person.
See, that is conservative movement is becoming much more liberal and progressive.
On this side of the United States, sure, yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
I don't want to say that too loud because I might, upset. Huh?
Sure. Every, so, look. So,
Sorry,
it's
I don't
okay.
hear it.
I understand.
I'm ready to cry.
I understand. Well, you gotta put your hearing.
I have it in, but
So you gotta make the readjustment.
I go every 2 weeks to Costco, they clean it, they give me a new wire, but I'm old and my hearing is getting worse and worse.
You should be able to hear us on the mic sitting
And I
right here.
don't, and the lady talks to my ear, I don't hear. I'm gonna get another hearing. I don't know what to do. I'm sorry, I didn't mean
You don't need to,
interrupt.
no,
I feel terrible because if I don't see mouth moving, I assume maybe.
No, it's fine, it's fine. You didn't do anything wrong.
See, but I don't eat Kitnio only because it just doesn't look right. You know? Yeah, so I just,
That's okay too.
No, what I find is interesting because a number of years ago, I went to a Seder at someone who was Sephardic, and this was before the conservative movement changed their ideas. And I understood that I could eat there during Pesach, everything was fine, I just avoided the kitniot, but the plates were good and everything, But now, I just can't bring myself.
You have to do what's right for you.
Oh, yeah, yeah. It's my business, yes.
I'm having breakfast with Eli on Sunday. I'll tell him.
Oh, please do. Yeah. There are.
If I, however, I was in somebody else's house and that was the only thing we eat, I would eat it.
Oh, well, usually there's other things
Yeah, I know,
around.
yeah. I've probably done that, but if I was in certain circumstances, like when I travel, not kosher restaurants around, so I might do.
Yes, of course.
Same
But
thing.
I am stricter on Pesach.
I am too.
So I make sure that if I'm traveling during Pesach, I'm going to some place that's kosher
Oh, of
Pesach.
course, right.
Whereas traveling the rest of the year, I might allow myself some leeway on Pesach.
Well, it was
No
funny.
chance.
It was funny, but before I started keeping kosher, was even any remotely religious, but we started doing sort of a Passover, very sort of. I would not eat pork or shrimp or whatever it was during Passover.
Ah, got it.
That's a funny memory for me.
Yeah.
Okay, we're gonna begin. It's all right.
Rabbi,
Yes, ma'am.
congratulations.
Hi, Ray. How are you?
I just turned 99.
Wow. 99. Wow. Yeah, we're gonna.
Wait a
Hold on, 11:40.
It's awful, I'm gonna start crying.
All right.
Even with your hearing aid. Call me, because I can hear on the
Okay.
phone.
So we are going to begin by singing to Ray as we pass along these the source sheets. Adrian, would you be kind enough to do this side of the room, and I'll do this side. So you ready? 1, 2, 3. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Ray. Happy birthday to you. And at 99, we say, and many more. Like you're, I know we want to know what your gene pool is. How we get a little bit of that. That's incredible.
You know what I said to myself the other day? My gosh, I still have my own teeth.
You still have your own teeth? She still has her own teeth.
Wonderful.
That's right. That is good. Right. I'll take 99 without the teeth. I'll be okay with that. Right? Right now, if you told me 99 was as good as you, but I needed dentures, I'd take it. So anyway, I have to, as I was telling Susie, I have to leave early today because I have to go to the AJU, the American Jewish University, the UJ, because we are using the mikveh to make a whole bunch of Jewish people today. So it's a very nice thing, but I don't want to be late because of the rain, so I'm going to leave. I had the phone set an alarm, and then I'm going to leave very promptly. So we're going to get right down to business. So the question is, on Passover, what are the most, just yell them out. And if you're online, don't worry about it. Yell at your computer screen. What's the most prominent aspects or things that you're supposed to do on Passover? What do you eat? What do you do during the Seder? Just yell it out. Matzah. Questions. What? Drink wine. Okay, drink wine. So if the question is drink wine, that's kind of interesting. Well, it's interesting, and it's also, it's telling. Because in the Torah, if you go back to the Bible, it doesn't say anything about wine on Passover. It's very explicit that on Passover, we are supposed to do things. But what's emphasized on Passover? The Passover celebrated in the Bible. What's that? The sacrifice, the biblical barbecue, the Pesach. The biblical, I know, it's good shtick. That's good. Yeah, I use that a lot. It's good shtick. The biblical barbecue is what is used on Passover. And the Paschal lamb. And then there's a side like, matzah also. And don't eat chametz. But there's no mention of wine, which is very interesting because when you get to the rabbinic period, so the Bible, let's say, concludes, 4th century BCE, let's just say, and then its period of codification is sort of a blur, but there's like a 600-year period of kind of, are you okay, Esther? You're okay? Yeah. Okay. So there's a 600-year period around between where the Bible ends and Rabbinic Judaism announces itself with the Mishnah, which is the oral law. Boom. See, I know Rabbi Goodman. He always puts out good stuff for me. Okay, and so now watch what the Mishnah says about the wine. I'm going to go a little quicker than I went last time. So, about the wine. This is the Mishnah. A lot of the ideas that shape our Passover Seder come directly from the 10th chapter, the 10th parak of the Mishnah about Passover called Pesachim. So this is Pesachim, Mishnah Pesachim, the 10th chapter. This is the first verse. Arve Pesachim samuch lemincha, on Erev Pesach, close in the afternoon. Lo yachal adam ad shetechshach. One shouldn't eat until dark. They want to make sure that someone's still hungry for the matzah. They don't want you going in, you're picking on your gefilte fish and you walk in and to Passover and you walk into your Seder and you say you're full. They want you to have like a hearty appetite. So I guess the matzah becomes tolerable because matzah is kind of disgusting. So you like matzah? Oh my gosh. Okay, well, we're going to have a disagreement about this. The shmora matzah is you like that? Okay, so anyway, they want to make sure that for people like me who think it's kind of gross, that they are, at least if you're hungry, so they don't want you to be, the matzah, I don't want matzah. Okay, that's the first statement. Now watch this. This is some beautiful teachings here. V'filu ani shebe Yisrael. Even a poor person of Israel, meaning a Jew, lo yachal ad sheyasev. That person should not eat until he reclines. In other words, there's an inclination that people who are here. We have extra sheets. You want to share? How many years have you been married? 33 years. You're getting a little fresh with each other over there. I see you're flirting with each other. It's cute, but your anniversary is next month. Okay. So an ani, a poor person, Sheba Yisrael, a poor Jew, lo yachal ad sheyasev. Usually, people who are poor don't eat in a reclined position because they're so busy. Like, think about it. Like I was telling my class last night, I'm often like eating meals in the car. Or when I used to work as a busboy, I remember eating in between shifts, like standing in the corner, right? You don't sit and luxuriate and And this is the Passover. You're supposed to lean to your left and eat like this. Why? Because that's how the Greco-Romans used to do it. We're emulating a Greco-Roman symposium. Like how the Greco-Romans with the grapes. So that's what we're doing, lean left. And also, why left and not right? Well, there's a practical reason. Most people are right-handed. I happen to be left-handed, and you want your right hand to be free. There's also a health reason. The rabbis didn't understand the esophagus, and they thought that it would go down, if you lean to your right, it would go down the wrong pipe. The food, that's just not right. But, so anyway, even poor people are not supposed to eat until they're reclined. On Passover, no standing in the kitchen in the galley and that's not how we're celebrating our freedom. Celebrate your freedom. Sit down, relax, take a load off. Okay, now here. V'lo yifchatu lo me'arba kosot shel yayin. The person can't start. They can't, start eating until they have 4 cups of wine. V'afilu min hatamchui, even if they have to get it from the local charity. All of a sudden, you can take 1, you can take 2, you can take, okay. All of a sudden, there's an elevation of the wine. This is the first mention of Passover wine in the Jewish tradition. It seems like the Mishnah is assuming that the reader of the Mishnah already knows about the custom. They don't say, on Passover, there are 4 cups of wine. There are 4 cups. Or tolerate the people who you're sitting with if they're no good either. You know what I'm saying? Yeah.
It says here that you have to have 4, the poor person has to have 4 cups of wine. Doesn't say before the meal because we eat 2 of them after the meal.
No, I understand that, but they can't start, like, you need 4 cups of wine. You don't start your Seder until everyone has 4 cups. That not has in their possession, not drunk 4 cups of wine. I'm sorry, I should have been more specific. But that everyone has in their possession. Everyone comes with a bottle of wine, essentially. Actually, not the same way, because the wine there that in the rabbinic times was diluted wine. It was more like syrup. I don't know if you remember going to Israel in the 70s, where you used to get like the syrup drink. So anyone spent time in Israel in the 70s, or even in the 80s? They used to have like syrup. And then you'd buy the syrup. They didn't have like commercial soft drinks, and then you'd add water to create like your drink. And so wine in biblical time, in Second Temple, in rabbinic times, was like syrupy, like concentrate, and you'd add wine to dilute it. That's how wine was consumed. But here it's saying, wait a second, a poor person, even if they need to go to a charity to get it, they need to have 4 cups of wine. So it's kind of interesting. There's a dual responsibility. First of all, they're placing responsibility on the poor person. They're saying, this is not a time for you to be prideful. It's not enough for you to say, I have enough money for 2 cups of wine, and I won't have 4. No. You have to have 4 cups of wine. It's really important, even if you have to go to the charity to get it. But then it's also setting up a responsibility in the society, saying we as a society need to make sure that the charities of our society are equipped to provide for people who don't have the access to funds to allow them 4 cups of wine. This is the ethic that motivates us to open our doors for Passover, right? Like a lot of people like have grown up with the ethic, like, you may not like them, but you still invite them, right? And no one would, and none of us here would say if they knew of someone who on Passover didn't have a place to go, you'd invite them to your home, because that's what you're supposed to do on Passover. And you're supposed to do it on Passover. It comes from here. There's a societal responsibility to make sure that people that don't have enough on Passover. But what's interesting is that all of a sudden, from no mention of wine in the Bible, all of a sudden to the Mishnah in the year 200 of the Common Era, something that was not mentioned, now to something that's so prominent, it's like the Mishnah doesn't introduce the wine, it just explains a detail about the wine, assuming you knew all about the wine. It doesn't say, the Mishnah, on Passover there are 4 cups of wine. This is the reason why we have 4 cups of wine. By the way, I'm going to ask you, why do we have 4 cups of wine on Passover? It's on the back page. That's right. We're going to get there. Don't go to the back page. Joanne, what'd you do? Oh, my gosh. First you like matzah, then you put everyone on the back page. You and I are having a big disagreement here. And so we'll get to it. That's one of the reasons we're going to get to it. But look how the rabbis structure the Seder evening. Look at this. Look at the second Mishnah. So it begins with it's on page 1, number 2. Wait, yes, you get to interrupt, right, because you're 99. Go ahead. That's what, don't worry, I don't know why they maybe that's how they referred, a charitable, I'm not sure why they use the word plate there. It's a charitable organization.
No. It's a charitable organization. They may have called it the Plate. I'm not sure what, maybe because it provided food, but it's not the Seder Plate. It's a charitable organization. Thank you. That's a good question. Okay, and the next line, number 2. Mazgulo kos rishon. You know, like on Passover, you're not supposed to pour your own wine because you're.
Somebody sitting near you.
Yeah, someone sitting near you pours your wine. So, right, now you can do that. The way we do it in our house is each kid has a glass of wine. Not like they get a glass of wine to drink. I mean, we do that too. Why not? But like, first cup of wine, one of the kids is responsible for walking around and pouring for everybody. Second cup of wine, kid's responsible for going around pouring for everybody. With the washing, the kid walks around with the wash basin for everybody. So we give the kids assignments to keep them busy. Anyway, you're not supposed to pour your own cup of wine because free people who are able, not like busboys who are and eating burritos in their car like crazy people, but free people who do this have servants who come and pour them wine. We're like being free people, so someone pours us wine. So if you're having a cup of a Passover, you can pour if you're with someone, you can have them pour you a cup, and then you pour them the cup. You can have the kids, whatever you want, but it's customary not to pour your own cup. Now there's a machloket, a disagreement between Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel over which blessing to make first. Don't worry about that. That's like how to make kiddush. So the first cup of wine is over kiddush. Now turn the page. There's a discussion in other places. For you, enough wine where it puts a smile on your face. Yeah, so you could dilute them. I dilute. I don't. That's a good question. I am not. You could dilute. Like their assumption in rabbinic times is that for people who are lightweights, who don't have a tolerance for alcohol, that they would dilute it even more. That there's this syrup, a high concentrate, and that if you didn't care for wine or you were unable to tolerate it, you'd add more water to it. I use grape juice, frankly, because I don't drink alcohol really, and because I have to be in services the next morning, and I don't want to come with a headache. And also, I don't feel good with it. So I use grape juice, and then I add water because it's too sweet. I don't like it.
Rabbi, I have a question. Where did the reclining come from?
The reclining came from this idea that it's from the Greco-Romans, that they are the paradigmatic free person. Now, what's interesting is Eileen made a good point, says, wait a second, how much wine do we have to drink? And Rosalie makes a good point that it comes from the Greco-Romans. The Seder, I'm going to spill give you one of my major points here, emulates the Greco-Roman symposium, but not too far. Because too far, the Romans, or think about like fraternities in college, we're the Greeks, and we have toga parties, and we get really drunk. And the Romans and the Greeks believed in drinking and eating to an excess, and to the point they would vomit, and then so the Seder is set up in such a way as it models the Romans, the Greco-Romans, because that was the paradigmatic free person, but doesn't want it to go so far where everyone is drunk like they would have been at a Greco-Roman toga party, because then it's no longer befitting of a religious ritual. So the rabbis are trying to kind of like hit the sweet spot in between modeling the Seder after the the Greco-Romans, but not mirroring the practice of the Greco-Romans. Model after, but don't mirror. But then so here's the second cup. And the second cup is telling us about, here, Mazgulo kosheni, v'kan haben shoel aviv, and there's when the son asks his father, v'im ein da'at ben aviv melamdo, and if the son doesn't know, then his father teaches, man ishtana halayla ze mikol halelot, bom, bom, mikol halelot, bom, bom. And then it goes through, and then it talks about it's a little bit different than our Shebechol Halelot, and then you do this, you do that, and then it talks about the dipping, and then about how each kid needs to ask more questions, and that you need to talk. The father needs to tell his kid about our journey as a people. You start out from our low points, and you end in our high points. The second cup is all about, so Alana made a point that you have a Seder that's built around 4 cups. The first cup is Kiddush. The second part is over Magid, over the telling. What's the third cup, which is on the next Mishnah? No. Third cup's not over Shulchan Aruch.
No, over
Birkat Hamazon, after you eat. Okay, over Birkat Hamazon. And then, that's okay. That's okay.
I haven't seen your moment.
That's all right. I'm getting to those too, which is good. What I like about it is when you make a mistake, you can just say, senior moment. Right? No, I said the wrong answer. Senior moment.
I'm glad I'm at an age I can blame it on that.
That's right, exactly. I'm a little still, but I'm getting some good gray hair going here, so it's okay. So anyway, then the third cup of wine is on Birkat Hamazon, and the fourth cup of wine is on Hallel, which you're supposed to sing after Birkat Hamazon. Many of us don't know about that because by that point you have kicked your company out and you are now standing over the sink and doing your dishes. But there is a custom that that you do your fourth cup is over Hallel. Okay? There's a point here that I want to make, which is interesting. Well, at least I think it's interesting. There's a point here that's interesting. That's a terrible introduction. Right. I asked you before what the biblical Seder was like. And you told about the sacrifice and a little matzah. And now, when the rabbis enter the stage, it's the whole Seder is constructed around 4 cups of wine. And we don't even know why there's 4 cups of wine. But the whole Seder is constructed around 4 cups of wine. The rabbis made this very bold move, which is going from a temple-based ritual, the Passover lamb, and biblical barbecue. When the temple is destroyed, they need to reconstruct the holiday. And they're able to do it by framing it, by emulating the Greco-Romans, but not going too far so that people are throwing up and it's not befitting of a religious ceremony, because they no longer have the biblical barbecue anymore because the temple is destroyed. So they changed the holiday from a biblical barbecue with sacrifice to a symposium-based meal with drinking, but not too much drinking. And there's actually restrictions in the different Mishnah on the amount that you can drink. And they introduce the cups of wine. And the wine becomes a prominent feature of this experience where it's not present at all in the Bible. And this is yet another example, Ken, I'll get to you in 1 second, another example of how the rabbis evolved Judaism, how there's like literally a revolution. The Passover that we celebrate would be unrecognizable to the Jews of the Bible. If they got into a time machine and came, from King David's time and came out here, the Passover that we do would be unrecognizable. Now, the cool thing is the Passover that we do to Jews from 2,000 years ago would be very recognizable. I mean, lots of what we do is right directly from this. So that's kind of cool. but there was an enormous inflection moment in Jewish history, which is the destruction of the temple, and the rabbis changed the nature of the holiday to meet the moment. Then I want to go, so I want to talk for a second, by the way, about the 4 cups and where they get this idea from. Because what they try and do is they try and read it into the Bible. I think it's a bit of a stretch, and we'll go over that in a second. I'll show you how they deal with that stretch in just a second, but go ahead first, Ken.
I was thinking about all the discussion about the 5th cup.
Good, exactly what we're going to get there. So, Ken, do you want to tell us about that? Do you remember?
Yeah, they weren't sure whether it should be 4 or 5 cups, and finally they decided the 5th cup would be on the table, and Elijah would decide.
Good. So Ken makes a point and Ken says, wait a second. We're not sure if there's 4 or 5 cups. Haven't you ever heard of having 5 cups of wine in Passover? Well, that's for Elijah. And any of you have ever drunk 5 cups of wine on Passover? Yeah, the company was really annoying that day. It just kept going. All right. But there is a debate, and this is Ken, thank you for opening this up. So the question is, why 4 cups? The most common answer is found, it's actually in the Jerusalem Talmud, not in the Babylonian Talmud, the Jerusalem Talmud, which is not the prominent Talmud. And it's one opinion that's sort of introduced with a whole lot of other opinions trying to explain why there's 4 cups. But it's clear that it's a polemic. It's trying to explain a custom that had clearly already existed. So the answer that becomes most popular through the ages is that in Exodus chapter 6, turn to the last page now, Exodus chapter 6, the Jews are given by God. Lachen emor livnei Yisrael, says God to Moses. Therefore you tell Bnei Yisrael, Ani Adonai, I'm God. V'hotzeti, and I will free you, or I will take you out. Etchem mitachat sivlut Mitzrayim. V'hiotzalti, and I will deliver you. Etchem me'avodatam, from your slavery. V'ga'alti, and I will redeem you with an outstretched arm through extraordinary chastisements. V'lekachti, and I will take you to be an to be my nation. And I will be your God, and you will know that I am the Lord your God, the one who brought you out of Egypt from slavery. And then line 8, V'heveti, and I will bring you El Eretz Asher Nasati et Yadi Latet Ota Avraham LeYitzchak LeYaakov, and I will take you to bring you into the land which I swore to give to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and I'll give it to you for a possession. I am God. Wait a second. Most traditionally, if you read this, there are 4 action verbs, and I underlined them both in the Hebrew and the English. Hotzeti, I will free you. Hitzalti, I will deliver you. Ga'alti, I will redeem you. Vilakachti, and I will take you. 4 verbs in which God is the subject and the Jewish people are the object of God's beneficence. God intervenes. Hold on for 1 second, Lois. I'll open it up for a second. God intervenes as the subject. We are the object, and God takes us out. And 4 words in Exodus 6, which are indicative of that: the freeing, the delivering, the redeeming, and the taking. So the rabbis conclude, there's a cup of wine for each of those promises. Each time God promises an action, there's overlap, obviously, between the action, where we are the object of that action. We celebrate it with a cup of wine. There's only one problem, and Ken alluded to that earlier. Then I'll stop for a question, which is there are 5 verses, not 4 verses. There is, look on line 8, the sentence where highlighted, I boldfaced the word bring. I will free you, I will deliver you, I will redeem you, I will take you. That's 4. Then line 8, I will bring you. So we're supposed to have 4 cups or 5 cups? And then why do most people go 4 and some people go 5? And how has that changed? And how is the land of Israel and our relationship with it in history guided whether we go 4 or 5? And then how does Elijah's cup figure into that? I'm going to do that all in 5 minutes because then I got to go. But before, Lois has a question. So here, just questions, not comments. Go ahead. But
That fourth one, take, does that mean that the Jews are the chosen people, and what does that mean?
yeah, exactly. Yeah, V'lakachti echem li la'am. Like I'm going to take you to be my nation. Yeah, it's a promise of. Yeah, so the whole question of Jewish chosenness is a big question. But yeah, here God's making your special people. You know, but as like I would say, lots of people can be special people. Like all of my kids think that they are my favorite. Right? That's the way they should all feel, right? Exactly. So, but the story that we tell, it's in the Bible, is of us, we're special. So yeah, so there's 4, but are there 5? So here's the deal. I just felt like President Biden. Here's the deal. Okay, so here's the deal. Yes, Ernie. Yeah, it says you have to have 4 cups. You don't have to drink the whole. Ah, all right, good. No, because you have here, Ernie. You are good, but there's one problem. You have to make a beret priya gafen on it. But then you have to drink. You can't make a bracha levatala. Yeah, don't go overboard. If you're like, I'm 50. I still I'm drinking grape juice. So I'm not going to tell you, as the most junior person in the room, I'm not going to tell you what to do with your wine. But I'm going to mind my own business here. So how did we get from 4 to 5? Well, as they're establishing the custom of 4, it's interesting. The temple gets destroyed. And after the temple gets destroyed and Jewish hegemony over the land is challenged and ultimately repressed, the Jews are sent into exile. So wouldn't it be a little weird if we established 5 cups of wine where the 5th cup is, I will bring you into the land which I swore to give to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob? But we're not being brought into the land. In fact, we're going the opposite direction. We're leaving the land. We're leaving the land, not going to the land. So how can we have a 5th cup to celebrate us going to a land when we are actually headed out of that land? So maybe that's the reason that only 4 cups caught on. Hold on for a second. I'm gonna try and wind up and finish here because I got to run. So the question is, there is one opinion in the Talmud from Rabbi Tarfon who says, no, it's 5 cups of wine. The commentators, like Rashi, one commentator, Rashi, looks at it and says, that's a mistake. It's a scribal error. You're forbidden from having 5 cups, only 4 cups. Some people, though, according to the Rambam, Maimonides, say, no, you can have 5 cups, not a problem. But it's by choice. So the debate over 4 or 5 cups, most prominent is 4 cups, and I think that has to do with the idea, again, of veheveti, the idea of being promised to be brought to a land that we're being exiled from. Doesn't sit well like to drink a cup of wine to that. However, while we have most people drink 4 cups, and most of you had not even heard of drinking 5 cups, the rabbis create a compromise position. And the compromise position is what Ken brought up earlier, which is the cup of Elijah. The cup of Elijah is the compromise between not knowing whether we should have 4 or 5 cups. So we drink, sorry, Ernie, not only pour, but we drink 4 cups of wine, and then we drink 4, and then we put out an additional cup, which is the 5th cup. Instead of requiring people to drink 5, We have 4 you drink and 1 you put out and you give it a special kind of status. Why is it, now I'm trying to finish up here, why is it called the cup of Elijah? And I'm going to bolt out of here because I don't want to be late to someone's conversion. Why is it called the cup of Elijah? Because in the Talmud, Elijah is the harbinger of the Messianic era where like things will get resolved. And so in the Talmud, when there's a argument to which there is not a resolution and the rabbis have it out, they will declare something called a teku, which is, they'll declare a teku, which means it's an acronym for Tishbi, Yitaretz Kushiot Uva'ayot. The Tishbi, Elijah, will come and resolve all difficulties and problems. So we call it Elijah's cup because we don't know whether we should have 4 or 5. And it's a way of summoning Elijah to come and to clarify. One spiritual reason that I love the Elijah's cup is because it's a celebration of uncertainty. We don't know if we are supposed to have 4 or 5, and the most famous cup that we have is the 5th cup, a cup of complete uncertainty. We don't know if we're supposed to have it. We don't know if it's required or even if it's allowed, and yet we put it on our tables, and as Jews, we celebrate uncertainty. And in a year in which so many of us have such strong opinions and will likely be at the table with people who do not share our strong opinions about the world and about where we are headed, Elijah's cup is a good reminder of a celebration of lack of certainty instead of certainty. Okay, I gotta run. So Ray, I'll get you next time. I gotta run. I can't be late for to make someone a new Jew. So have a good day and a happy Passover, or I'll see you next week. I think I'll see you next week, and we'll see you all soon. You can just return this. Okay. I did. I said you're chosen, but I got one.
That's what Rabbi Goodman's going to talk about next week. Bye. Okay. So you can hold your question till then.
Is it 6:30 tonight? What? 6:30 tonight? Yeah, well.
Okay, let's make
I
it.
think it starts at 7:30.
What?
What time tonight? Well, but we're coming early.
No, what, yeah, but my hearing is so bad, it's awful.
No, she doesn't know. Tonight for the celebration?
Yeah. Yeah, I'll check it out. I had to, then I had to stay in.
Yeah, that is what she said. Cannot go hiking with the Kai, with the Kai.
Can't go hiking?
With the Kai group.
You're not going to go hiking with them? Well, you don't have to have a membership to go hiking with them. Go to jury's assessment? Huh?
What, I don't have to go.
Is that the deal?
You know, to go is fine. To go by myself, I don't.
I'm so confused. You're throwing too many words now.
Oh, I'm sorry, my teeth are loose, let me,
Pardon?
my teeth are
Well,
loose.
I don't know, because Mark Curtis, I know.
Oh, yeah, Mark, right, he's the guy.
He's the guy who said you gotta join. Right.
No, his wife. No, I filled out the application and
Say go to
everything.
the guy.
No, I said.
I can't do the walking.
Huh?
I can't do the walking. I'd love to go.
Yeah, well, there are some slow people, I think that's why.
slow. My back hurts.
Oh,
The last time I went on a hike with the synagogue, we had a Boy Scout troop.
Oh,
And
okay.
Ernie Miller was the leader, and I said, come on, Ken, I want you to help me.
And how old was your child?
Went road with the Boy Scouts.
Yeah.
And it felt like it was 140 degrees.
Oh, my God, no, I don't
We
like,
walked, wait a
yeah.
minute, we walked for about 50 paces. He said, we're going back. Everybody will die. Bye. So it was
Oh,
a last
perfect.
hike,
That
50
sounds,
feet.
that sounds like a perfect time.
It was perfect.
And my back goes after 300 Well, 2 days is Zoom and 2 days are in the gym. I have a trainer, and he does a Zoom session with me, and a small amount of equipment. Started doing this during COVID because I wasn't going out.
Is it one-on-one, the
Yeah.
Zoom session? What, it's one-on-one?
Yeah.
Oh,
And I have 2 different trainers, so I get 4 different workouts, because 2 are in the gym, 2 are at home, 2 different
they charge
styles.
you for the Zoom?
I'm grandfathered in, or grandmothered in.
Yeah.
Because I've been going to him, and I pay about 60, but I think he gets closer to
60 each time?
Yeah.
Oh, wow, that's a lot.
Yeah, and I do it 4 times a week,
Yeah.
that's $240,000 a month.
Bye-bye, bye-bye.
About $1,000 a month.
Oh, wow.
But I figured when I got Social Security, I didn't need the Social Security, but I still had a budget, but I could use it for,
For that.
I hate exercise.
Yeah,
I will do everything I can to be out of it, but if I have an appointment,
Yeah,
I'll be there.
yeah.
So I know myself, I know how important it is.
Yeah, I've got,
Well, I know, I
he
won't.
left early. What do we do? We've got
I
nothing.
know myself well enough that I will not do it unless somebody's making me do it. So I would say I pay somebody to make me do this.
Well, after COVID was around for a while, I bought myself a stationary bike.
Yeah.
I went on it about 4 times.
Right, well, he makes me go on the stationary. I'm a rowing machine and all
No,
kinds of
that's
stuff.
good, that's good. I
You wanna
bought it.
talk to Adrian? Did you say you
Yeah.
wanted to talk to Adrian? Talk to her on the way out.
I have to gather my things.
Well-
Well, I can just, no.
Okay, now.
So I'll see you Friday night. Well, maybe just somebody will pick up. Mike and Carol are not coming. You know, that's right. Yeah, well, he's the easy way out. He have a friend. Did you? I never did. That was right. Thank you, boys, for putting it that way. Well, I'm getting to the point where I'm trying to get out into the world. I'm trying to get out into the world. Well, I'm trying to convince Marty to go to lunch down there at a Greek barbecue place. But I have to take him to the barbecue place because this is the only barbecue place where you go to and they're open until they sell out. Move.
Yeah, what time are you doing? Oh, yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I didn't sleep last night. But, you need, good.
Very much.
And take a nap, of course.
We normally bring, but not.
Okay, he's gonna stay home and drink 5
We didn't
months.
let you be human beings. All of a sudden, you gotta be human beings. Past tense, you already did. Be wise because you don't anymore. Well. Whatever. Three, I take a few things at night. It's okay, but it's the third thing you might have to do.
don't know if you wanna wait, I have to give her my thing. Oh, no, not again. Really? You do?
Yeah.
What's going, oh, he's working, helping you, he's learning, he's learning.
Oh, yeah, we've been talking, and I let her know it was my birthday.
You give the check?
Oh, wait a minute, you got the check, right?
Okay.